Hello. Please join me. Maybe Christel, you want to sit in the middle?
Can I get
So
some makeup done?
we
Thank you.
pretend there's a little bit of gender balance in this battle, right? So I'll start with, first I'll start by disclosing something. I know them a little bit, so you understand that the rapport will be very friendly. And maybe I'll start with you, Christel. Can you simply introduce yourself and so people have a little bit of context of who you are?
Hi, my name is Christel. I'm the co-founder and chief commercial officer of Bolt Global. Bolt actually is an interactive media platform that converts your media experiences into monetary value, and we do that with the help of the blockchain. So we're more in Africa and in South Asia.
Simon?
Thanks, Paul. So I'm Simon Kemp. I'm the founder and CEO of Kepios. We are a consultancy that helps people all around the world to make sense of what people are really doing on the internet. So we like to challenge a lot of those preconceived ideas and mistakes that people make in the media about what's happening online. If you've ever seen the Hootsuite and We Are Social reports, that's the biggest chunk of my life. We produce those reports on behalf of those guys. So lots of data, lots of challenging misconceptions.
And you're both based here in Singapore, if I'm not mistaken,
Yes.
right? So maybe I'll start with you, Simon. You just said a lot of misconceptions. Can you give me, I know it's going to be a tough question to answer, but can you give me one misconception that people might have, one that actually strikes you that you like to talk about?
Yeah, so I think a lot of the world of the internet today is influenced by one or two key data points that get shared on a regular basis in the media. I have a massive amount of respect for Mary Meeker and the reports that she puts out. But one of the things that she reported in her most recent report was that the growth in internet users has slowed. And in fact, the latest data that we're getting from people like the ITU, from Global Web Index, from GSMA Intelligence, lots of very well-respected bodies out there. In fact, the number of internet users is increasing. We're very close to some magic numbers, 4.5 billion. Hopefully we'll be reporting when we publish our next set of reports in January. So still very solid growth. We're still seeing close to double-digit growth in internet users year on year. So definitely no slowdown in the progress of connectivity around the world.
I guess most of it's in emerging countries.
Exactly that. So we're seeing all across emerging markets in Africa, Southeast Asia, you name it, that's where the vast majority of growth is coming from, partly because those populations are growing as well, but also because devices are becoming cheaper, data's becoming cheaper, it's more accessible, there's better infrastructure. So all sorts of positive signs for continued growth of connectivity.
And I guess all sorts of positive signs for you, Christel, because it's exactly the kind of markets you're in, right?
Yeah, precisely. We were really inspired by the growth that we've seen in Africa. So we're a lot of where our users are from Nigeria, from South Africa, Kenya, and even Morocco, Egypt, right? So we look at that as a new wave of people that want to experience the internet in a different way, and we're here to provide the access, the connectivity, the content, and as well as integral partnerships for hardware and devices.
Yeah, so the new wave, and I think that's very interesting because already when now it's not a new wave. When people started using the internet through mobile devices, right? It was people who had never seen the internet before and suddenly had a cheap phone and could actually access the internet. And the behaviors were already very different from people like me who started using the internet on the Sun Microsystems. That dates me, by the way. But meaning that generation that gets the internet accesses now in emerging countries will again have a very different set of behaviors and different set of expectations, whether it's speed, and here, because we're talking about a lot of, and this is a bit of the point of this panel, we're talking about this bridge between the offline and the online world. I know these words are not perfect, but I mean, so that we can all understand. It's a bit of the Holy Grail. Since the beginning of the internet, we've been promised that, well, at first, let's be honest, at first the internet was this weird thing that was out there, but then we were always promised that at some point there were some overlapping and it would be very easy to bridge them both. And we still don't have it. As in, we still have, especially for brands, it's still like the internet and even in companies themselves, the way they are set up, you still have the digital team and you have the rest. And it sometimes feel that these two aren't connected. Is that something you agree with, or you think that I'm just the old fart here that thinks like people thought 20 years ago?
Simon.
So I think your perception's accurate, and it's gravely concerning that we're still separating out digital from other things as though somehow we're a different person when we go onto our devices and we get connected to the internet. This is complete nonsense. You know, I mean, the fact that there's people in the audience using their devices right now as we're speaking to you, you're not a different person when you start looking at your phone. I think it's really interesting that you say that mobile evolution and the people that are coming online for the very first time today. You go around somewhere like Indonesia, so the markets that Bolt spends a lot of time looking at, you know, whether it's in Africa, whether it's across Asia. The kids in particular, so I'm using kids in not a derogatory way, just to speak about the fact that they're young, they're coming online for the first time through a mobile device, but they've never necessarily used a computer. They've never owned one for sure. They probably never will, and as a result of that, they don't use keyboards, they won't learn to type, therefore they're going to be using voice interface as the primary way that they interact with their devices. Now, from a user experience perspective, there's all sorts of ways that changes how people use their devices. But if you think about that just from the basis of the blurring of an online-offline experience, if I'm Google, just take as an example, and I'm reacting to a voice search that this person is doing. If you were doing a voice search in this room right now, you get lots of background noise. All of a sudden, Google knows that I'm probably in a very large hall. It can make a guess that I might be at a conference. And it gets a whole lot of extra contextual information. So the idea that there is this online-offline divide is purely in mostly marketing heads, and it's a very dangerous misconception that is leading to a lot of wasted opportunities. So I'm guessing that it's not just voice. There's plenty of other places where this comes in. But if we're separating it and we're siloing it, we're being stupid.
Do you want to add something about that, Christel?
I mean, I fully agree with Simon. We think alike, I think, in many ways of how the internet has developed because we've known each other for quite some time. A decade, I would say, scarily so, right? So we regularly confer on, you know, what's happening in Asia and, you know, now more recently in Africa. We just had a long conversation about what's going on there. And I think the rise of mobile devices, the rise of low-cost, you know, feature phones and even low-cost Android smartphones has been fundamental in actually reaching that. There was even a huge debate on whether 5G is relevant, 4G is relevant, and we were having that discussion as well, whether 5G would actually lead to the acceleration, right, of consumer adoption, access to the internet. And I think we were discussing this just now. We were like, nah, it may not actually really be the case. So, yeah.
So the one thing, and I hear people in the room might know, but people watching the live stream might have heard, the one thing that is very different in Asia compared to, because we are in Asia, compared to old Europe, where I'm from, and where you're from, by the way, as well, Simon, but you've decided to live here like I used to as well, is this, the bridge that we just talked about is very prevalent in payments right now, right? It's, of course, China is a poster child almost of that, when you see that people pay with their faces and with QR codes. Whereas in Europe, yeah, we see Apple Pay and Google Pay, of course, Google Wallets being adopted, but not at the same pace. So, and that's a bridge. So for someone who's never had a computer, like you said, he or she will never have a credit card either. So that bridge is already there. So isn't there, and that's my next question, isn't there an expectation of that bridge being a given? That there shouldn't be a differentiation between the discussion we just had is a discussion amongst, because we've known each other for 10 years, we've been around the block, but then for a new generation is like, of course my life has to be interactive with the real life automatically. Why shouldn't it be so?
The new generation. So you've almost answered everything in those two words. What's most fascinating is the internet up until, let's say, the early 2010s was primarily guided, if we say, shaped by people who'd been around for a while. Folks like you and me, we were younger back then, but we had already established habits in our lives. So things like paying for things with credit cards, things like which kinds of shops we would go to, where we would go to for certain kinds of advice. The biggest shift that we're seeing now is we have an entire generation that is coming online who grew up in a world where the internet was available. Whether they had it in their own pockets at the time is not really the question that we need to think about. You think about the average person that's turning 18 anywhere in the world today, they're still shaping an awful lot of their habits. They're still deciding where they want to get finance from. And I think, again, we'll go back to these emerging markets that we talked about. A lot of the countries that we're looking at in the reports that we publish, you've got much, much higher penetration already of mobile payment systems than you do of credit cards. So let's take a country like Indonesia. You've still got less than 5% of the population has a credit card, and yet you're seeing significant double-digit use of mobile payments. Now, whether that's through something like Grab or Gojek, which are the sort of local equivalents of Uber, if you like, those systems that have mobile wallets in them that have then enabled these people to go out and pay for purchases at the corner food stall, local merchants, whatever it may be, online or offline. There is no distinction in these people's minds as to whether this is a mobile device or it's internet powered. This is my money. This is how I pay for things. And that's how the merchant that I'm buying from receives these things as well. I think we do ourselves a massive disservice by trying to cluster these things and give them names. These are just people's lives. They're looking for technology to facilitate the things that they care about. They don't mind if it's online or offline or anything else you want to call it. It's my life and I'm doing things I care about.
So Chris, you wanted to add something? Go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, I just wanted to add on to Simon's point. I think for us, right, we're not just talking about even the unbanked. We're looking at the underbanked. Basically, people who don't use their bank account beyond, say, once a month, I would say that's a bigger population than the unbanked all around the world, right? And that covers at least 90% of the entire African continent and South Asian continent that we talk about. So when we look at that, right, and to Simon's point as well, people already are used to the internet. And they're actually used to getting free stuff, right? Whether it's content, whether it's, well, I would say mostly content and access and information and education, right? And for us, right, our push at the end of the day as a company and as a movement is to actually come up with an audacious proposition. What if we pay you to watch your content instead?
You're enabling me because that's exactly the question I was going to.
Okay.
Because I know, so the business model, you'll explain better than me, but the business model is that people in emerging markets that you're touching have access to content, they can watch content, and they're getting paid in, I guess, in tokens. So they're getting rewarded for watching. The interesting bit here about this bridge with online, offline, is that what do they convert these tokens with? So currently, I know, and Simon mentioned in Indonesia a few times, I believe they can convert parts of it into data plan. So they can top up, right? They can top up a data plan, right?
Yes, correct.
I shouldn't maybe pitch. Maybe you can tell us what kind of stuff can they do with these tokens?
Right. So basically, our inspiration for this, right, actually came about because we looked at today's modern social networking and internet platforms. They've given everybody lots of access, but they don't actually pay you for the time that you spend on the platform, if you think about it this way. So when we look at it, Facebook earns about $20 billion a quarter. Google earns $40 billion a quarter, and they give you free content, as a result of that revenue. But what if we pay you to watch your favorite content instead? But there always was a difficult way to get around this problem because of the integration of payment systems all around the world, different fiat currencies, and people don't actually maybe need money. They need something that they can redeem their time for. And that's why when the blockchain came around and we studied it really closely, we realized that actually, if this could be on a mass adoption scale and allowed for this token to be used as a barter for other stuff like internet access data plans, partner promotions, even hardware, because we have a partnership with Hisense to bring all these connected devices and content all around Africa and South Asia. It could be a win-win proposition, not just for us, but also the user. And we want to give back to the user. To borrow a often used line by Standard Chartered, in a sense, we believe that we can do well by doing good. So, yeah.
But that's interesting because since we're talking about this bridge between offline and online, it means that I could be watching content on your platform in that instance, and I would get rewarded with tokens that I can barter against anything. But that could mean that I could actually, at some point, you could implement barter with physical stuff. So this link that we just talked completely blends, because you could say, oh, I have been rewarded, and these rewards could be, I could get a television. I don't know what, maybe nobody has a television because everybody has a mobile phone, but I mean, you know what I mean. So this link already exists, and that's where I was saying earlier that a generation that will discovering content the way, for instance, that your platform enables, will have, and already maybe has, an expectation that there's no difference between the offline and the online world. It's normal that I activate something in the real world with my phone, right? Am I?
Yeah, precisely. I think we discussed this many years ago, Simon, right? We talked about how modern day social networks are one level up from the original game that was invented, which was religion. I think we had this discussion. I remember this discussion very fondly with Simon, I think in 2012. We said that the modern day Facebook and Google and Instagram, whatever, not Twitter, right? They are evolved versions of religion, and it is in a certain way, right? So if you take one step further and look at how we can really merge the online and the offline, it's, I think, through things like that when you can really unite that bridge. So
yeah, what's interesting about that, religion, a big part of what keeps people coming back to religion is the sense of community. Now, you can call it religion, you can call it politics. There's a lot of different things that revolve around community. It's a dangerous topic, so let's probably not go too deep into it right now. But you're absolutely right. The community element of social networks, I suppose 5 years ago was a lot stronger. We're seeing less of that now. A lot more people are going to social networks to find content, and the conversation elements have moved into messengers, whether it's WhatsApp, WeChat, and similar. But I think what's really interesting is a conversation, so when you and I, Paul, are having a conversation on WhatsApp, are we still the same friends that we would be in the offline world? Of course we are. It's complete nonsense that somehow you'd make a separation of that. I think this idea of rewarding people is really interesting, because a lot of people get their first reaction is a little bit nervous about it, but this is such a standard concept in the marketing world, right? One of my favorite examples of this, again, we're going to go back to Indonesia because it's such a good example of the way things are changing. Even a few years back, you have 7-Eleven, so the chain of convenience stores right the way across the country. Most 7-Eleven stores in Indonesia offer free Wi-Fi, which extends just outside the shop as well. And if you go to an awful lot of the 7-Elevens in, not the big cities, but out into the more sort of the towns and the villages, there's a nice little clean porch just outside the front of the shop where kids can sit, so they can go into the shop, they can buy their Coke or whatever else, their snacks, and they can sit outside the 7-Eleven, they can use the internet, and they can share with their friends. But you've got a community sense that's going in there. If you're going to hang around and use the internet for an hour, then you're going to need some snacks while you do that, because otherwise you're going to get thirsty. It's this very clear, the internet's free, in theory, or it's part of your bundled packages. I think that kind of mentality is very, very sensible, giving people the things that they wanted, but augmenting it with additional value.
So let me then go to the Holy Grail for advertisings and brands, because the people are there. Because for now, mostly the advertising is very separated, because Google will know that you are on your mobile, and maybe they know that it's in such a room, etc. And they will try to target you according to that behavior. But they haven't really crossed to have an actual activation on the physical space you're in. And that's a bit of the Holy Grail. It's to say that this blending using tools like IoT will be able to be done once we really have a bridge to say, maybe, I don't know, I'm in that 7-Eleven, and any brand of food or beverage or I don't know what could actually be activated directly there, because it knows that Christel or Simon is there, it knows that you have an interest in this brand, and because of the use of sensors, because of maybe the use of buttons like the ones SiC Fox does, so suddenly there's a potential activation right there. Do you think, is that science fiction? Or is
Absolutely
it
not. No, right? I think...
No, yeah.
Do you want to dive in on that one?
No, you go first.
So there's two different bits to this. There's sensor-triggered activities. So, the devices that we carry everywhere in our pockets and in our purses are already triggered for doing this. They're able, with NFC, with Bluetooth, you name it, there are capabilities that exist already to interact. But just as a marketing industry, it's not for whatever reason, we've not jumped on that properly. Then you've got the other bit, which is augmented reality. I know it's one of those buzzwords that's been bastardized by the industry, and it's come to mean something that it's not. But you look at what Snapchat for the average person on the street has just done with their new fashion glasses that they launched, I think just this week, maybe last week. So they're a fashion accessory. They've got two cameras either side, and it connects to your device, and it then connects to the internet as well. If you imagine walking into a store, seeing a can of Coke, and suppose my glasses had these things in there as well. The device knows that that's a can of Coke, because we've already got AI technology that can recognize pretty much all of these things in an instant. It recognizes the product or the item, whatever else it may be, and then it creates something on top of that to add value to that interaction, whether it's information, entertainment, education, inspiration, you name it. And I think this is the big exciting opportunity that we've got now. Marketing moves away from being this frustrating interruption to the thing that you were doing before and becomes a way of augmenting new value on top of every experience, whether it's watching content, whether it's buying a product, whatever it may be.
And, I would say with absolute credit to our host, SiC Fox today, what I found really interesting about their technology is that modern day IoT devices require a lot of bandwidth, right? It's very high bandwidth consumption. So the way they're using it, using radio waves and using that sort of unused spectrum and creating that global network of it, it's very, very clever. And I think I can see a lot of adoption for that and a lot more activations as well, because internet access, fast internet access, not just downlink, but uplink is a huge challenge. And I think we can both agree that that is actually the biggest hindrance to greater adoption on augmented experiences by anyone, not just the developed markets, but developing markets as well.
Yeah, the change of 5G is not going to be this sudden revolution that all of a sudden magic happens, but the fact that you look at a market like Korea, where in the last 12 months, with the rollout of 5G, the average mobile connection, not just for 5G connections, but the average mobile connection is now beyond 100 megabits a second. 4 times the bandwidth that you need to stream a 4K movie. Exactly as you're saying, the uplink, the downlink that these connections are going to provide is going to make it possible for the ideas that people have had to actually be feasible. The gap at the moment is the technology is possible, the ideas are there, but the translation of that into real world has been hampered by networks and bandwidth. I think as we see the rollout of 5G, the next round of technologies that come beyond that, the ideas that we've dreamt of go beyond, I have a connected fridge, to a fridge that actually does my shopping and all the other stuff that we've been promised. Flying cars, all the magic. But genuinely, like, you look at the data that's out here, you look at the trends that are going on in the real world, this is feasible within the next 2 years. Nice, easy activities that will add value to our lives and will stop these pesky interruptions.
I was about to say, because the time is up, and since I'm the master of the clock, I'm deciding to add one more question. I'm saying that to the AV team behind them, as be like, hello, I know I'm going over time. So do you think, and that's a hopeful thing, do both you guys think that we will have less of interruption marketing because, I'm being very hopeful right there, I told you, because of these potential activations that are very personalized with the data that they have about you? I mean, it's fine if Google has data about me. I just want them to not interrupt me and to actually use that smartly to actually provide me with an experience in the physical world that actually I need, and not that one that keeps interrupting me. So do you think, realistically, we'll have less interruption marketing? And that's your closing words as well, so please use them wisely.
I would say yes, because I think the time has come where new models of brand engagement and new models of advertising and sponsorships are going to come about. We are focusing on that through the blockchain because we believe in giving value back to the user directly, not just through free content, but actually paying them to watch it, letting them redeem their time for something else. So I think with a lot of the new progression of technology today, the focus shouldn't be about the technology. The focus should be about how we can accelerate the adoption for people to really value their time on it.
Agree with that entirely. I think, to your question, are we going to see it? That's a choice. It's up to everybody in the audience and those watching at home. Hi, folks. You can interrupt people or you can add value. You know yourself which one of those works in a real-world setting when you're face-to-face with somebody. It's no different online. We've talked about that multiple times already in this conversation. You have the opportunity now to create a relationship of mutual value with your audiences, with your customers. Why would you do anything other than create things that give them what they want and help you to achieve what you want? That's the opportunity that so much of this technology provides. Let's seize it and stop being idiots.
Well, I think that stop being idiots is a perfect way to actually close this panel. Thank you very much, guys. Give them a big round of applause. Christel, Simon, thank you. Thank you.